This video is hopefully to help beginners to both Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo to have a look at using effects on their projects. Now, I don't necessarily mean effects that you can get by using adjustment layers or filters. These are effects that you can use sort of independently with adjustments and filters. Now, there are two ways to get to these effects. One is via the Effects tab, which should be grouped in with this panel along with the Layers tab, and you can click on the Effects tab like that, and you have these various effects that you can use. And the other way to get to the effects is you come back to the Layers tab, and at the bottom of the Layers tab you have these icons, and one of them is FX, and if you click on that, it will open the layer effects in its own box. And if I just open this here, the Effects tab here, as you can see, it has all the same options: Gaussian blur, sort of like outline, 3D, and then finishing on color overlay and gradient overlay. So in that respect the options are the same. Now the only difference is in this panel here, the effects panel, if I click on this arrow here, it drops down the options that you have to alter. So like in this example I've got here is the outer glow options. I will not actually make any differences at the moment because I haven't got a tick in the box. And let me just shut that. If you just put a click in this box and make a tick, it will open those options. But if I do the same thing in this panel here, outer glow, I've got a tick in that already, but you won't actually get the options for this particular one that I've got ticked until you click on the name. You've got to click on the name. So I click on that. Now as you can see here, the options you have in outer glow in the effects panel is just to be able to change the color, to be able to change the opacity, and to change the radius. But the options you get in the layer effects sort of floating panel is you can change the blend modes and you can change the intensity. So you do get more variations of options using the layer effects button via the layers panel than you do with the effects tab that's over here on the right. This is slightly more obvious with, let me just turn that one off, say 3D for example. And the 3D options you have here is opacity and radius. So the only two options you can get via the effects tab. But if I click on the name 3D here, and as you can see there is loads of variations that you can make using the layer effects panel rather than the effects tab. So in my opinion, it's probably best to really steer clear of using the effects tab over here. Quite why Serif haven't made as many options available here as they do here, I really don't know. Don't understand their thinking here, but I find it best not to use this effects tab because I'd much rather be able to see my layers and use the effects from this floating panel here. Once you've opened this panel or you've used the tab here, it will put an FX icon on the layer, and this means whatever changes you make now in this panel will only affect this layer. and this is true in both programs, and as far as I can tell, everything that I can do in Designer I can do in Photo and vice versa. So I'm not going to spend time swapping between the programs too much to show you they do exactly the same thing. I will do sort of the basic look at things in Designer, and then I will move into Photo and just look at some other things. So let me just shut that down for a minute. In both programs you can see I've just set up a basic new document with a blue background. I need a coloured background because some of the options later you'll need to be able to see what's going on outside of whatever it is I draw or make. So first thing I'm going to do is, as I'm in Designer, and Designer is probably more going to be used for people, artists who want to draw things, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get the brush tool, make it a bit bigger, let's go with black, and I'm just going to draw that line there. So as you can see, that line is now made a new layer above the blue background, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add effects to this line. Now it will not affect the layer underneath, only the layer that the effects have been added to. So I will click on the FX button. Let me just move that away slightly. So I'm going to put a tick into Gaussian blur. Now Gaussian blur is always the default one, so it will be already on that option, and basically you just have a slider here that will blur the image to different degrees. So let me just turn that one off. Outer shadow, I'll put a tick into that, and remember you need to then tick on the name to get the options for that particular effect. You can change the blend modes and the opacity. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to push all of these right the way up to the, as far as they go from the get-go. So as you can see, we have this outer shadow here. So the intensity is just how strong an effect that is having, whereas the offset is bound on 0, it's going around both sides of this line, whereas over here it's just coming down from the right hand side. Now the direction of the shadow is also controlled by this circle here, which at the moment this blue line is set on 315, and you can click and drag this around so the shadow can be at different angles. Now this will go around it, I can't remember, it's probably like 30 degrees or 45 degree angles. You can double click inside the number and enter your own angle, but I will leave it on 315. And then the radius slider, now if I put this down to 0, this edge here will be just as straight and hard as the line I've drawn, whereas if I put it up to 100, the edge of that is much softer. And then you also have the opacity, you can make it fully black or just a little bit grey. So that is the outer shadow, or sometimes known as drop shadow. Now this one really won't work so well, or if at all. This is inner shadow, which works in a similar way to the outer shadow, but will obviously be inside. I haven't always had much success in getting this to work, but this is more to do with, I think, because I'm just using a solid black line as a sample rather than something else where an inner shadow may work better. So I'm not even going to attempt to make changes because nothing will happen on this example that I've got here. So I'm now going to come to outer glow, click on the name to get the options. Again, you've got the blend mode and opacity, radius, intensity. You can change the color, you can click inside that color panel there, and then you can change how you pick the color, but I will leave it on this white color. And then it's just a case of, if I move the radius, you can see that that outer glow is now coming around the outside edge, which is why I needed the color background, because you probably wouldn't have seen that if it had just been no background at all. And you've got the intensity slider there, so that is the changes you can make with outer glow. Now we have inner glow, which probably a bit like inner shadow will not have too much effect, if any. Let me see whether, oh, so it will have an effect. Yes, it's bringing this in. Like that. You also do have the option to have the inner glow going around the edge or on the inside and have the edges still the original color. So you can change those options. And turn that off. And come down to outline. Click on the name to get the options. Now, I don't really need a black outline because you won't see it, so let me just change the color of that. Let's try a yellow color. So again, you can change the blend mode, opacity and what have you, but let's move out the radius of this. Go to about there. Now you've got the alignment, which by default is on outside, but you can have it in the center, because at the moment the whole of this yellow line will start from the outside and move outwards. If you come on to center, it will be half inside the black area and half outside, and if you have it on inside, it will be fully inside the bounds of this black line. So that is half in the black area and half outside, and that one is fully inside the edges of the line of that black line that I made. So let's put it back to outside, and then you can also then change this to contour, which means you will lose the color that you've picked because it sort of makes a gradient, but you can then edit the gradient if you so desire. And there's also a much different type of gradient option where you can then pick the different types of gradient to add to that effect. Let me put this back on solid color. Right, next one is the 3D effect. Click on this to give you the options. Now there are lots of different options here, but let's first of all just bump up the radius of this effect. So hopefully you can see this. We have a sort of, it's trying to make it look like a 3D line rather than just a flat line. And you have this dial down here with a dot in it, and you can move this dot around and it will sort of change where the sort of imaginary light source is coming from. So you can move this around, you can even move it into the center. You don't have to stay on the outside, you can move it wherever you want to get the effect you want. So I'm going to move this into the center like that, and then you can change the color of the light that's been added. You could have extra light sources. There's all sorts of options here. I'm not going to go through them all, but you do hopefully see what it is this effect will give you, and you can sort of soften the effect using this slider here. So I'll turn that one off, and we'll come down to bevel and emboss. Click on the options here. Now, like before, you have this circle with a dot on, so you can move the effect in all sorts of different positions. And let's move this radius first, and you can see the effect. Now, it doesn't look too good at the moment, but the different effects you can have on here at the moment, it's set on pillow, but there are 4 different types of effects. So you've got inner, so it brings this in so that it looks like the light source is sort of coming from this angle over here. Outer and emboss, and then we can go back to pillow. So again, you can move this around to get a different effect. You can also change the color of the light or the shadows, and if you click on this, you not only can change the color, you can change the blend mode. Invariably I just leave it by default on screen, and multiply for shadows, and the opacity is at 75%, but again you can change this by clicking on the color box. So that's pretty much the bevel and emboss option. These last 2 are just different overlays that will go over the particular layer that you have drawn. Now at the moment I've got a black overlay on a black image, so you can't really see it. So if I change the colour of this, say to green, it will just overlay green onto that image, and then that's basically all that does. You can change the opacity of that, and with the black that's underneath you will get a different shade of green, or you can change the blend mode and get different effects that way. So that's that one. And the last one is the gradient overlay. Now it starts with the default gradient of being dark on one end, lighter on the other. You can click on the gradient itself and change the gradient options and colors and things like that. You can change the different types of gradient. Blend modes, again you can change the angle, how the gradient works. So that is really the end of this look at the basic side of how the different effects work, and that's in Designer. And like I said, all that will work the same in Photo. So if I move over to Photo now you can use it on a photo, but I would imagine 9 times out of 10 most people will use these effects on text. So let me start with a bit of text. That, and right, so I've got my text layer now. So if I now click on the effects button to get the panel, I'm going to first start with let's start with a 3D. Let's zoom into this so we can see this a bit better. Zoom out once more, I think. Alright, that's it. Right, we're starting with 3D. So I'm going to just push up the effect of that a little bit like that. Just going to change the direction a bit, so let's have that effect roughly in the middle, and maybe no, not that one. Which one is it? I just wanted to lower the brightness, probably diffuse or something like that. oh, that's it, shininess. Just tone that down a little bit, just so it's a slight effect. Now this is where you're not restricted to just using one effect. The beauty of the effects panels is that you can add all sorts of different effects. So far I have the one effect, but if I now put a tick into bevel and emboss and click on the name for bevel and emboss to give me those options, this has altered this slightly, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push up that radius a little bit more, and I'll have a look at maybe, no, not emboss, let's try. Yeah, maybe outer, just soften that slightly, leave that like that, then maybe add a bit of outer shadow, so I'll put a tick into outer shadow. Now outer shadow I find is not always noticeable straight away, so I invariably push it quite high, and then once I can see it I will then just tone it back a little bit to get the effect. That I like. So right, that's not too bad. Right, I can't think of anything else that I want to add to that. So yeah, I've got 3 different effects on that bit of text. So if I close that now, you can see the whole effect. And if you find something you don't like and you want to alter it, you can just come back to the FX that's on this layer and click on it, and it will bring back the panel. And if you then decide that you don't want the bevel and embossing, you can just take the tick away and it will remove it. So you can put the tick back in and bring it back. So if I then took all of these ticks out and closed it, that FX will disappear. Right, so let me just zoom out again. So as I said, most people will probably use it on text, but you can use it on images. So let me just, I've got this sort of world image here, so let me just copy this and then paste it in to this image, move it down to under here, and then resize it so we can see it. So I'm going to click on the FX button, and the first thing I'm going to do is an outer shadow. Click on the name to give me the options. Again, I'm going to start off by just pushing up all the options quite high, and this time I'm going to change the angle so the shadow is just underneath. No, in fact, I suppose if I wanted it to match that one, I probably should be coming at the same angle. That would make more sense, wouldn't it? Right, so let's just tone this down a little bit. Right, so that's not too bad. Now what I will also do is add the 3D effect. If I click on that and then I push up the radius quite high, hopefully that now, let me come off the move tool, hopefully that now will give this globe image a much more rounded looking and spherical looking 3D look to it. So I can now close that. Let me just move this over here for a second. Let's center this. It might be a better option. That's it there, and then if I center the text as well, yeah, see, that looks quite good like that, is it? So both those layers have effects, but the bottom layer doesn't. So what I could do, if I click on the top layer, hold down the shift key and click on the bottom layer, all the layers will be highlighted. If I right click this and group them together, they will now all be grouped together, but those layers within the group will still have their effects that you can still go back and alter if you want. But if I wanted to add an effect to the whole group, you still can. So if I click on the effects button now and I wanted to add, let's try the inner shadow, see whether it will work on this one. I bump them all up. Yes, this is slightly have an effect. Right. Right, let's bring this back slightly to about there. So I've got a bit of a shadow going around the whole of the image. The intensity, so this is almost giving me a frame for that now. So if I close that, that whole group has now got an effect on it, as do two of the layers have their own effects. So hopefully you can now see sort of how using effects can be used in both Designer and Photo in exactly the same way. Like I said before, I would personally always use the FX button rather than the Effects tab, because you do get more options. Because as I can say, in the 3D options, you've only got two possibles here from the Effects tab, but as you saw from the Effects button, you get many more options. So basically that is the end of my quick look and beginner's look at the FX or Effects tab. Thank you for watching and goodbye.